Good evening, Internet Explorers. I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly, and today we're venturing back into places that should be left the heck alone. I'm not a big urban explorer myself, but let me know in the comments if any of y'all watching happen to be, and welcome to the top 5 scary abandoned places you should never explore. Number 5, Chernobyl. I've made the executive decision to kick off today with the most obvious location. For those who might not be aware of the horrors of Chernobyl, allow me to start today off with a mini sad history lesson. So the disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on the 26th of April of 1986 at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat. It is one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents rated at 7, which is the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. The meltdown and explosions ruptured the reactor core. And destroyed the reactor building. So this was immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire, which lasted until May 4th of 1986, during which airborne radioactive contaminants were released and deposited onto other parts of the USSR and Europe. Approximately 70% landed in Belarus, around 16 kilometers away. The fire released about the same amount of radioactive material as the initial explosion. In response to the initial accident, a 10-kilometer radius exclusion zone was created 36 hours after the accident, from which approximately 49,000 people were evacuated, primarily from Pripyat. The exclusion zone was later increased to a radius of 30 kilometers, from which an additional 68,000 people were evacuated. Following the disaster, Pripyat was abandoned and eventually replaced by the new purpose-built city of Slavutych. In July of 2019, the Ukrainian president announced that the Chernobyl site would become an official tourist attraction. Immunology experts recommend that tourists wear clothes and shoes they are comfortable with throwing away, avoid plant life, especially the depths of the forest due to the high levels of radiation. Oh, why? Just because the areas were not cleaned in the aftermath of the disaster and remain highly contaminated. Research showed that fungus, moss, and mushrooms are radioactive. So among the buildings that were abandoned were multiple schools, with the small city having 15 preschools for just under 5,000 attendees. Most of the buildings in the city are practically empty, but not the schools. School books and class magazines were clearly of no value to looters, and city residents were more worried about saving at least something from their personal property, leaving the buildings almost intact, minus the effects of being left empty over time. Moving on to other places of note, the Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on the 1st of May in 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but those plans were cancelled on April 26. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on the 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract the residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions: the iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, the Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival shooting game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars with a similar design as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park vary. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss is built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole area. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986, later returning it to its original position. As much as it would be fascinating to explore history, I'll wait till it's a little less detrimental to my health. Number 4, the Paris Catacombs. Deep underground the city of Paris are hundreds of miles of tunnels in a complex network that is one of the oldest in the world. It's a darker city that few tourists experience due to the high risk of danger. People often get lost. The walls can also collapse at any moment, so many who venture there wear miner's helmets. There's no electricity among the endless winding canals, corridors, and crypts filled with mounds of unidentified skulls, which are estimated to be about 6 million deceased Parisians. There are parts so tight that you have to lie on your belly and slither forward like a worm to get through. Only a small section of the catacombs is accessible to tourists, while the rest has been illegal to enter since 1955. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't explore the tourist accessible areas. Heck, I want to visit those myself, but stay out of the illegal areas. Urban explorers who frequent the catacombs call themselves cataphiles, which I must admit is a very smart moniker. They paint, sculpt, and create other art, while also building false walls, trap doors, and secret chutes to keep away the cataflix or catacops who try to catch them trespassing. You must know a cataphile who can be your guide to even try to explore the unknown, or else risk getting lost or stuck for who knows how long. As much as I love exploring creepy history, the thought of getting lost in such a cursed place is a type of scared I'm not fond of, and don't particularly ever want to experience. Number 3, the Island of Poveglia. Yep, an entirely abandoned island, and it's got quite the history. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yeah, I'll backtrack and elaborate. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, so fearing the crazy spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. Go! At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires were burned once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. A small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work has started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation, so maybe this is one spot on today's list that I don't want to visit, ever. Number 2, Bodie State Historic Park. Formerly a genuine gold mining town located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed away in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of B-O-D-E-Y to B-O-D-Y, and then a few other phonetic variations to eventually B-O-D-I-E after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora later day signed as such, an accidental typo that got stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. A particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timber and explosions underground. Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives too soon in the process. When the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for the act. According to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Nowadays, if you remove anything from the land, even like a little pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past, who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. So kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 1, Plymouth. The Caribbean island of Montserrat was quite the getaway spot in the 1980s after music producer Sir George Martin opened a recording studio there called Air. The appeal of working with his team and spending a few weeks or months recording in a tropical paradise was so compelling that the world's most famous rock stars, had a good time there. We're talking like Mick Jagger, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Paul McCartney all laid down tracks. The party sadly ended abruptly when twin disasters struck the island. Beginning on the 18th of July in 1995, a series of huge eruptions at the South Friar Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash falls across a wide area of southern Montserrat, including the capital of Plymouth. On the 21st of August in 1995, tephra fell on Plymouth, necessitating an evacuation that lasted until September 3rd. Following renewed volcanic activity on the 1st of December, residents were evacuated for the second time, but were allowed back on the 1st of January. On April 3rd, it was evacuated for the third and final time. The island was divided into risk zones. During some periods, entry into Plymouth was prohibited, and at other times it was allowed during daytime only to those with a means of rapid escape. And the last time that access was legally allowed to the area during daytime was June 16th of 1997, which was right before I was born. On the 25th of June, a further massive eruption produced pyroclastic surges that killed 19 people and reached nearly to the island's airport on the eastern side of the island, which had remained open until that time. Between the 4th to the 8th of August of that year, a further series of large eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many of the buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many of the residents. The flows, lava, ash, and other volcanic rock types were mostly compact, having a density similar to that of concrete. The removal of the overburden would have required the use of explosives, bulldozers, and other resources way too expensive for all of this. It was anticipated that the soil underneath the hardened mud and lava would have been scorched and left completely non-arable by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flows. The entire south half of the island was declared an exclusion zone because of the continuing volcanic activity at the hills. So the government of the island was moved north to the town of Brady's, although Plymouth still remains the technical capital. Recently, Montserrat has begun chaperoning driving tours into the exclusion zone, where visitors can walk through the ruins of the former capital, which now lies buried under some 20 feet of ash and stone, where the smoking volcano still pumps over 350 tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky every day. During a tour, one sees modern concrete buildings shattered by the unbelievable force of nature. Over 10 feet of ash and mud have buried so much of the city that in certain areas, only rooftops poke up from the dust. We're talking like papers and envelopes are stacked on desktop piles of work, which were made pointless by the pile of ash that fills up the floor and outside balconies. 19 people died from breaking the law and entering the exclusion zone before it was safe, by the way. The hot gas cooked their lungs, and they looked similar to mummies when they were eventually found. Yeah, big pass from me. And that brings us to the end of our time, and another 5 entries have made their way onto my do not travel to list. Hopefully I find the time soon to start tackling my I want to go there list. If you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more unknowns from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.